In this video, I'm going to be painting up Asurmen and his Dire Avengers for Warhammer 40,000. At the time of this recording, the Asurmen model was brand new from Games Workshop and I'm really excited to paint him up. For these models, I'm going to be using the Splash Dash pre-shading technique, and it starts with a white prime of all the models all the way around. Now moving to the key ingredient, I use dark wash from Army Painter and I mix it with about 20% water, so 80% wash, 20% water, and I mix it into a cup like this, and then I generously apply it onto all the models. This creates nice dark shadows while leaving the tops of the surfaces generally still white or at least a light gray. Here is a model with Splash Dash compared to one without. I apply this treatment onto all the models regardless of what they are, including this little statue guy over here. Now the one thing about this technique I will admit right off the bat is that it does sometimes pull towards the lower parts of the model. And if you do get that, you'll just want to use a slightly cleaner brush and then just brush over those areas to get rid of the excess wash. As long as the wash is still wet, you're going to be able to manipulate it and kind of spread it out a little bit more evenly on your models. Make sure the step is fully dry before you move on to the next one. I'm going to start with the main color of the Dire Avengers, blue, which I'm going to be using High Lord Blue Speed Paint from Army Painter. And now I'm going to be painting it all over the torso and the legs of all the Dire Avengers. Although I am very careful around the helmet, I make sure to not get any of the blue on the helmet. You want to keep that as white as possible, and you also want to avoid the gun and then the area of the cloth and grenades towards the back of the model. So when you get close to those areas, slow down and make sure that you have a little bit more brush control. I also applied this blue onto the Exarch's banner. I just paint the entire thing blue. It will be a canvas for what I'm going to be putting on it later. I do the same thing for Asurmen as I did for the Exarch before this. I paint his legs and his torso and his arms all blue. I leave his helmet white. And you also probably notice I really don't mind painting all my models fully assembled. Brushes are generally small and you'll be surprised how much it's able to get in between. Any area that's going to be left white, for instance the helmet or the sash around his waist, and especially the cloak, you'll want to be a little bit careful around. Try not to smudge it. If you do though, you can always come back with white paint to cover it up. Asurmen's banner is also going to be painted blue. Now right around the words at the bottom, I intentionally leave it white, so the next step is going to be easier when I work on the banner. Next, I switch to blood red speed paint. This is going to go on Asurmen's helmet and also on his cloak. I was very careful in the previous step to not paint on the helmet anywhere and also to not get any paint onto the cloak. You want to keep those as white or as pre-shaded as possible. Now you can carefully apply the red onto the helmet, making sure that you do not touch the plumes on the top, and then you also apply it liberally all over the back side of the cloak like this. You will also want to apply red onto the leading edges of the cloak like I'm showing here. I next switched to Grim Black Speed Paint. Now I left all the guns unpainted earlier. I left them white and pre-shaded. And at this point, putting on the Grim Black on this creates a nice one-touch shadow and highlight of all these guns. By leaving the magazines on the hips unpainted, it's also very easy to put some Grim Black in these areas and make those magazines stand out. For this Exarch, I also paint his shuriken pistols in black, and then the knife on the back, I also paint that black. And for Asurmen, I also paint his twin shuriken pistols in Grim Black as well. I now switch to a smaller, more pointed tip brush, and I apply the same Grim Black into the recess of the faceplate of each of the Dire Avengers and the Exarch, all in the same way. The nice part about Grim Black is that it's very low viscosity and it will just kind of seep into the areas and provide full coverage as you're painting. Next, I applied the Grim Black onto alternating stripes on top of the plumes of the helmets like this. So I applied these stripes on one side, and then I applied onto the leading edge of the plumes, and then I moved to the other side and try to match it. You'll do one black, one white, one black, one white like I'm showing here. Next, I use Runic Gray, which is a bluish gray, and I apply it onto anything that looks like stone. For instance, this rubble that Asurmen is standing on, I paint this with Runic Gray, and it gives it a nice light gray shade with some blue, and I use the same color for this statuette here. If you followed my videos, you'll know that my army is Beltan. Whatever army you have, you want to add a unifying color. In this case, for me, is Orc Skin, which is a nice bright green. Now, putting it on top of the plumes of the helmet like this unifies my Dire Avengers, which otherwise has an independent color scheme. When you look at my army and you see the touches of green, you know they're all part of one big force. Now, Asurmen is a Phoenix Lord, so I'm going to leave his plumes white and black, but I am going to paint this armband here in Orc Skin Speed Paint to also unify him with the rest of my army. The Exarch has a similar armband, so hey, why not paint that green as well? Time to switch to acrylics. I first start with gunmetal metallic acrylic paint, and I apply it onto all the barrels on the shuriken catapults wherever I see them. There are some dangly bits in some of these models as well that benefit from silver, so hey, I went ahead and painted those silver. It makes the models more interesting and something to draw your eye to. Any of the piping along the backs of the helmets and also on the sides of the guns do get silver also, and the barrels of the shuriken pistols get gunmetal as well. I also decided to apply some gunmetal along the back area of the pistols and the catapults right here. It looks like a breech area, again to create some interest on the model. Now I'm going to use a slightly different paint. I'm going to be using Turbo Dark Ice to Never paint. This is a nice color shifting paint, which when applied 2 to 3 layers onto any blade, like for instance the glaive of the Exarch right here, or on the sword of Asurmen, creates a really nice icy blue hue on these blades. It makes them look really sharp, no pun intended. Time to add some bling onto all these models. I'm going to use Greedy Gold metallic acrylic paint, and wherever you see these little symbols on the shuriken catapults and so on, you'll be applying this gold onto it. Also, any of the dangly bits along the waist, you can adorn them and make them look a little bit more fancy by applying some gold to it. The Exarch has a few more areas right over here along the front, and then also his center chest plate area has a nice big golden feature, so you want to paint all of this gold, and then after that you'll paint this pattern on his helmet gold as well. Be careful not to get it onto the white of the helmet as much as you can, and then on these areas of his glaive you can paint it gold. Really, it's up to you where you want to put gold on. It just creates a little bit more of an attractive look for the model and makes it, especially for the Exarch, it helps him stand out from the rest of the Dire Avengers. As I was working on the glaive, I went back to gunmetal just to paint this tiny portion over here in silver. And then I switched back to Greedy Gold to apply some gold right on top of the flagstaffs of both the Exarch as well as Asurmen. Asurmen gets quite a bit of gold in many areas, and I will show you in this montage over here. Starting with these dangly bits on his right thigh, and then after that moving to his sword right here, the hilt and the pommel of the sword get gold. The area in the center of Asurmen's torso also gets gold. I carefully apply it onto the buckles and also to the big circular area in the middle like this. I apply some gold onto this symbol on his belt. Asurmen's shins have a pattern on it that's slightly raised. What you want to do is just kind of touch that area with your gold and it will transfer on. The butt plates of his shuriken pistol magazines also get like a touch of gold on it. This symbol on the top of his helmet also gets some greedy gold. And this rounds off Asurmen. It makes him look extra special with all these extra decorative parts. I next changed to matte black acrylic paint, and this is a very light absorbing color, and I use it only on very small areas. For instance, the straps over here on the Exarch, and then I also put it on the handle of his glaive here. It's okay if it's kind of light absorbing. It's only a very small area and you won't notice it as much. I also use it on all the leather straps on anywhere that I see. For instance, over here on Asurmen. Also the 4 straps on his torso right here. I switched to matte white acrylic paint this time, and I diluted a little bit to make it slightly runny, and then I use it as a touch-up portion. For instance, the very front of all the Dire Avenger helmets are very noticeable, so you want to paint those to make sure that they look nice and bright. I also highlight the raised edges of all the sashes on all the models. This slight highlighting step allows the model to pop a little bit more. I also cleaned up Asurmen's faceplate over here. I got some paint on it earlier, so time to clean up. I then carefully freehand in the yin and the yang symbol right in the middle of Asurmen's chest. You'll just want to follow the 3D sculpt in this area and you will be able to recreate what looks like, at least to me, the yin and yang symbol right in the middle of Asurmen's chest. I next use pure red acrylic paint. I thin it down just slightly and then I apply a glaze onto the cloak area right here. This will get rid of any speed paint coffee staining and make the cloak look nice and smooth. I next use this red on the center of Asurmen's banner. I carefully apply it onto the helmet that is on the banner like this. What I do on one side of the model, I do it on the other side as well. Just kind of take your time in this step. Take your time and be careful. I now go back to matte white and I apply it onto these areas of the helmet. I paint one white, I leave one, I paint the next one white, and so on, and I just kind of work my way around the helmet. I also apply white onto all these little stars. They are slightly raised, so all you have to do is just kind of glance your brush against it, and you would do the same for this white moon over here that's right next to the helmet. I go ahead and finish off all the stars right here. And then I repeat the exact same thing for the opposite side. I next switch to matte black and then carefully apply black onto these letters at the bottom of the banner. They are raised, so as long as you hit it from an almost parallel angle with your brush and just slightly glance it, your black will transfer onto these words. And also apply black onto the borders above and below the words. I next apply the black onto the plume of the helmet, alternating with the whites. I next use demonic yellow fanatic paint and I apply it onto these areas, which are kind of like the sunshine portion of the banner. So they're also raised. You will just apply them carefully like you did the previous steps. And then after this, you're basically done with this banner. Back to pure red acrylic, and then with a much smaller brush, I apply this onto all the rune stones in the center of the chest of all the Dire Avengers and the Exarch. I paint the 2 rune stones on Asurmen's pauldrons in red as well. I next use Aegis Blue Fanatic acrylic paint. This is a light blue and it works really well on these little searchlights that are on the left rear torso of each model. Next, I'm going to be using dark wash right out of the bottle and applying it only to areas that I had applied Fanatic acrylic paint before. Any areas that I painted with speed paint are already shadowed and highlighted, so I do not need to put wash in those areas. Just kind of watch this slight segment over here on where I applied the washes. Applying this wash onto those acrylic areas will create the depth that you need to make these models truly come alive. Without this wash, any area that had acrylic paint is going to look somewhat flat, and you don't want that. I'll go ahead and roll this video to show you areas that I applied this dark wash. As you get to Asurmen's banner, you want to be slightly careful with this wash. You want to use it as almost like a panel liner and not glaze the whole thing with this dark wash, otherwise it's going to make it look really dark. So just apply it along the lines on both sides of the banner and it will allow it to have a little bit more definition. Now for one of the finishing steps, the eyes. I'm going to be putting pure red acrylic paint into the eyes of all the Dire Avengers with a very small detailing brush like this. Just a simple swishing stroke and you'll be able to get the lenses on the helmets this way. For Asurmen, I use green skin acrylic paint and I apply it into his lenses of his helmet, and he'll make him look different from the Dire Avengers that accompany him. This step is purely optional. I decided to get a little bit spicy and I wanted to do some freehanding. So what I did is I used the same detailing brush and then I applied this red streak all the way on the inside of his cloak like this. Granted, when it's fully assembled like this, it is much harder to get into the areas, but I was able to do it. And with a little bit of practice and a steady hand, you can too. So try it if you want. If not, it's completely optional. Now for water transfer decals. The Dire Avengers use these black ones over here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut them out. I cut 4 of them because the Exarch doesn't need it, only the regular Dire Avengers do. Now after you cut it out, you'll want to place them in a jug of water like this, and it will soak up the water into the decal and give it about maybe a minute. After that, use something like microset, like I'm showing here, apply it onto the helmet. Transfer the decal onto your brush and then place the decal on the helmet carefully, moving it in place with your brush to its desired position. Next, for the Exarch's banner, you can use any of these decals here, but I'm using Beltan, so I'm going to be using these 2 transfers right here. I cut them out, and then as usual, I dunk them into some water so that they free up. And then I apply some microset onto the banner like this, and then transfer it either straight onto the banner like I'm showing here, or you can transfer it to your brush first and then onto the banner. Move it into place so it's almost right in the center like this, and then you want to do it for both sides. Next, I found these white words over here. They look pretty snazzy, so I went ahead and cut them out, and then after that I just kind of shortened them a little bit like I'm showing you here. I cut off some of the words here and here so it would fit the banner, and then after it came off its transfers, I put it onto the banner like this and then move it into position. So it looks very similar to Asurmen's banner with a symbol in the middle and a bunch of words at the bottom. It looks really attractive this way. So the top of the banner really needed something, so I chose these little symbols in white over here, cut them out, and transferred them onto the banner like this, moving them into position. And after you're done with this step, the banner looks pretty dang complete. And it's nice because you can do all of this with just decals and it will look terrific and sharp. Time to finish off the bases. I used some black primer and I just applied it onto the rims of all the bases just to clean up any of the overspray earlier. I allowed the primer to completely dry, and then using any plain old flocking and white glue, I used brown flocking, but you can use anything you want. put glue on top of the base like this and then just simply dunk it into that flocking to have a completed base. It doesn't need much to make it look really good. The next step is optional. You can apply tufts with super glue, and using a screwdriver you can scrape away parts of the flocking you had put earlier, apply some glue, and then apply this tuft onto the base. Like I said, it's purely decorative and it does take a little bit of extra time, but I did do this for all my Aeldar, so might as well do it here as well. Protect your work with one layer of gloss varnish followed by one layer of matte varnish, and after this you're all set. Here is a rotating view of my Dire Avengers that I painted for my Bael'tan army. The Exarch's banner and the green plumes really kind of pull it together with the rest of my force. And they are led by the Phoenix Lord himself, Asurmen, which over here I tried to paint as close as I could to the box art. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope this helps you paint up Asurmen and your Dire Avengers faster. Until the next time, happy hobbying, and I'll see you soon.